Welcome to the future. PBS Digital.
We're the History Detectives, and we're going to investigate some untold stories from America's past.
This week, did these mysterious documents allow recruits to buy their way out of military service during World War II?
Did this famous study of the Roman Empire lead an American senator to predict the Civil War more than a decade before the first shots were fired?
If this toy mouse is named Mickey, Walt Disney may have some explaining to do.
Watching the detectives get so angry when the teardrops start, but you can't believe it 'cause you got no heart. Watching the detectives, it's just like watching the detectives.
This program was made possible by contributions to local PBS stations by viewers like you. Thank you. Our first story opens a window on a little-known chapter of the Second World War, when some Americans marched to the beat of a different drummer. American history has been fundamentally shaped by force of arms. Since the Revolution, some 42 million Americans have served in the military in dozens of conflicts around the globe. Perhaps no war has won more popular support than the crusade which followed Pearl Harbor, a great national struggle to defeat fascism in Asia and Europe. For almost 4 years, America marched with an unprecedented singleness of purpose, making home front sacrifices, building an armada of ships and planes, and sending its young men off to war. But just how uniform was this support for World War II? A collector from Aiken, South Carolina has 2 documents which he bought on the internet. These may be evidence that the war presented some Americans with an agonizing choice: love of God or love of country.
Since I was a kid, I was always pretty much fascinated by World War II. I was on one of the sites one day, and I saw these documents. Every time I'd look at it, it would just kind of make me curious. What is this all about? And it just fascinated me.
I'm Tukufu Zuberi. As a sociologist with a special interest in popular dissent, I'm curious to meet Dave Watts and see what he's found. This certifies that Raymond Ullery has contributed the within stated sum to the Church of the Brethren to be used in civilian public service. Wow. So what do you make of these, David?
Well, I really don't know. I know that further on it states that this contribution is intended as an alternative service to war, in which my conscience does not permit me to engage. I get the feeling that these are some type of certificates that by paying a certain sum of money would get you out of military service.
Okay, but the certificates are only for $5 each. Together, that's only $10.
Yeah, that would have been cheap.
Yeah. And this is 1943, which would make it World War II.
That's right.
Do you know who Raymond Ullery is?
No, I have no idea who he is.
Yeah. What do you want to know?
Well, I want to know what these documents are. Is this some type of document that by paying a sum of money were you exempt from military service? If not, what were they for?
Okay, I must say that I have never seen certificates like this. I'm going to take these and go see what I can find out and bring you back an answer.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dave is almost certainly wrong about the certificates. You weren't permitted to buy your way out of military service in World War II. That was something the U.S. put an end to after the Civil War, when the wealthy often paid money to avoid the draft. But the text does clearly state that the contribution is intended as an alternate service to war, and these terms, civilian public service and Brethren Service Committee, suggest some kind of well-organized operation. Up here in the right-hand corner is a registration number, and down here we have the General Financial Secretary's signature. And on the back, Building with Christ, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. This is Jesus' well-known plea for pacifism and nonviolence. I'm pretty sure the certificates have something to do with religious conscientious objectors during World War II, but I'm not sure how. J.E. McNeil is executive director of the Center on Conscience and War. She tells me that the history of conscientious objectors in the U.S. began when members of the so-called peace churches left Europe in the 17th century to avoid military conscription. And which churches were the peace churches?
Well, they're generally considered to be the Quakers, the Mennonites, and the Church of the Brethren.
Church of the Brethren. They're on the certificate that I'm investigating.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because they're pretty big players in the conscientious objection history.
J.E. tells me that during the Civil War, America first acknowledged its citizens had a moral right not to bear arms. Instead, they could serve in military hospitals or other military non-combatant roles. The issue flared again during World War I when some conscientious objectors opposed any requirement they serve in the armed forces, whether in combat or not. Those men were forcibly inducted and sentenced to military prison, where some fared worse than they might have in battle.
One guy in particular refused to wear the military uniform, so they let him stand out in the Kansas winters naked until he caught pneumonia and died.
That's some pretty harsh treatment. The story of Joseph Hoffer and his death from pneumonia became public and drew criticism in newspapers. On December 16, 1918, the Secretary of War, Newton Baker, issued an order prohibiting the brutal punishment of military prisoners. J.E. tells me that in 1940, as the German army occupied Paris, FDR was forced to plan for conscription. With war clouds gathering for Americans, the leaders of the peace churches didn't want conscientious objectors to suffer as they had in World War I.
So they created a program, Civilian Public Service, CPS, which was alternative service, which allowed them to do work of national importance, work that was helpful to the country but didn't involve killing other people.
Okay, you know, this term, civilian public service, I have these certificates, and as you can see, it says civilian public service.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen a certificate like this?
No, I never have.
Although J.E. hadn't seen the documents, she was very familiar with the Wartime Civilian Public Service Program. It allowed conscientious objectors to serve the country in other ways, fighting forest fires, building roads, or working on community health projects.
It was based on the CCC camps, the Civilian Conservation Corps camps from the Depression era.
It's fascinating history. But I still don't understand what one of these certificates bought you, or how the Church of the Brethren was linked to the program. I've emailed the Church of the Brethren's national office in Elgin, Illinois. Archivist Ken Schaefer responded with some news. The Church of the Brethren contributed $1.3 million to support the CPS program. Wow, that was a lot of money in 1943. It seems that the peace churches knew Franklin Roosevelt had little sympathy for conscientious objectors. So they decided to fund a program themselves. Raising money became a grassroots effort. These wooden cups were used for coin donations. Collecting stamps was another way to support CPS. And listen to this. One of the ways of recognizing individuals who donated money for CPS was by issuing certificates. Here's one for $50 and another one for $10. And they look exactly like ours. Okay, so now I know what these certificates were, but who bought them and who was Raymond Ullery? The Brethren office sent me a directory of all the men who refused to join the military and opted instead for the CPS program. There's no Raymond Ullery listed. He's probably one of the Brethren members who donated money to support the program. But there's something strange about the directory. It's a pretty small book. 22,965 Brethren registered for military service. and only 1,386 opted for civilian public service. That's only 6%. So 94% of the brethren opted to serve in the military. That's not what I expected from a church that encouraged its members to resist war. David Eller is a professor of religion and history at Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania, a Brethren-run school. Here's what I don't understand, David. Why did so few of these guys follow their faith? Wasn't the church's official position alternative service?
Yes, it was alternative service. But to fully understand that, you have to see that the Brethren were in a period of great cultural transformation.
David tells me that the Church of the Brethren members first settled in America in 1723, setting themselves apart from what they saw as a sinful world. But by the time our certificates were issued, most Brethren were part of the American mainstream.
And so the boys who at 18 and 19 when drafted went off to war believed that they were in a war to preserve freedom.
So World War II was considered a different kind of war.
It was a different kind of war. If there was ever a war in American history that meets the test or the qualification for a just war, in at least most Christians' mind, it would be World War II. There's a clear evil that has to be stopped.
Yet, many of them supported the idea of CPS. I mean, the Brethren raised $1.3 million. I mean, was this a kind of guilt giving?
Personally, guilt is a strong word. I would say the church as a whole was conflicted. There were congregations who totally supported CPS, 100% behind their young men. There were other congregations who were proud of their number of servicemen.
This must have been a very divisive moment for the church.
It was very divisive. If you really want to understand that, the best thing to do might be to talk to somebody who actually went through CPS.
David recommended I speak with 85-year-old Harry Greb. He was baptized into the Church of the Brethren as a young child and became an avid student of the Bible.
I took that experience rather seriously, and I read the Bible, especially the New Testament, and it was the teachings of Jesus that were my influence.
Despite the attack on Pearl Harbor, Harry says he couldn't defend America with arms. He realized how unpopular his decision was when traveling by rail to his first CPS posting in 1942.
They discovered that we were COs, we were not going into the armed forces. And so one day on our return from the dining car, the people in the club car stood up and sang the Star-Spangled Banner. Wow. We just stood there until they were finished and then moved on.
After fighting forest fires in California and working as a cook, Harry was posted to a state mental hospital in Maryland. They were looking for volunteers to staff the tuberculosis sick ward. It was hellish work.
Most men didn't want to go there because you had a good chance of contracting tuberculosis. And I wasn't married, I didn't even have a girlfriend, I had no excuse not to go. So I said, yeah, I'll volunteer to go there. And so I did, and I spent 1 year approximately on that ward.
Weren't you afraid of getting sick?
About 5 years or more after CPS, I did come down with tuberculosis and spent 6 months in a sanitarium.
Wow.
I showed Harry our certificates. Have you ever seen one? Did most of the young men in his congregation follow his example?
Definitely not. I think there were something like 80 men were drafted, and 4 of us eventually went to CPS. I was very disappointed in the beginning that men did not take the CO position, because I had really expected that a lot would, although I guess I have more understanding now than I did then.
Harry then told me a story that I think will help Dave understand the meaning of his certificates.
Hey, how you doing? Come on in.
I tell Dave the documents had nothing to do with buying a way out of World War II, but had been used by the Brethren to support conscientious objectors.
I just never thought of that.
And I met a guy named Harry Graybill, and he was really able to point out the significance of these certificates to me in a very profound way. Seeing Dave's certificates took Harry back 50 years to one of the most painful times in his life.
Two of my best friends did go into the armed forces, and that, for one of those, it was quite a shock for me because I really expected that he would take the CO position. One was killed in the Battle of the Bulge in Europe, and the other was killed in Italy.
Harry is at peace with his decision, but for a long time afterwards, one of the men who volunteered to fight would return and haunt his sleep.
I did have dreams about the one friend that for some time, maybe even years later, that dreamed that he really was not killed, that he was still living. So it had a tremendous impact on me.
I tell Dave his certificates are from a little-known chapter of history when a small army of Americans refused to go to war. Although Harry Graybill wouldn't pick up a gun to fight fascism, Dave says he's every inch a hero.
It takes a lot of courage to stand up and express your convictions, especially in an era of World War II. And I think that is a very honorable thing for somebody to do. And these are going to have a special place in my collection because they stand for something that a person was proud to do and was not afraid to do, and to go against the grain, so to speak.
I began making a list, reasons to go into the armed forces and reasons not to. The reasons to go into the armed forces were money, respect, opportunity to go to college, and so on. And the other list said, well, I can't kill anybody. And that was just about it.
Find out more about conscientious objectors during World War II at History Detectives on the web at pbs.org. Building an exclusively volunteer army has never been an easy task, which is why forced enrollment, or conscription, became essential in developing America's military might. On May 8, 1792, Congress passed the first National Conscription Act. It established a peacetime uniform militia, mandatory for every white male between the ages of 18 and 45. During the Civil War in 1862, the Confederacy enacted America's first wartime military draft. Union states followed suit. Controversy soon arose because these laws allowed a wealthy recruit to buy his way out of service. In New York, this ignited a 5-day race and class riot. General conscription was reintroduced again during World War I, but it was World War II that generated a staggering 10 million draftees. By the time we entered Vietnam, loopholes had become a major source of social friction. The war itself was also unpopular, and citizens took to the streets, protesting and burning draft cards. When the U.S. finally pulled out of Vietnam in 1973, the peacetime draft was discarded in favor of an all-volunteer armed forces. Today, this all-volunteer military has 2.4 million members and is considered one of the best trained in the world.
Our next story investigates how one man's study of the Roman Empire may have helped spark the American Civil War. It's March 1850, and South Carolina Senator John C. Calhoun is on his deathbed in Washington, D.C. For years, Calhoun has occupied the center of the political stage, first as an ardent nationalist, and in later years as a passionate advocate for states' rights and a defender of slavery. Now, in his final days, he makes a startling prediction. The Republic will dissolve, and there will be war. And indeed, 11 years later, in 1861, the South would abandon the Union, and a Carolina militia, fire the first shots of the Civil War at Fort Sumter. Calhoun's influence on these events cannot be overstated. His legacy is marked throughout the South with grand monuments. A man in South Carolina recently bought a 6-volume set of books from a small-town library and made what may be an astonishing find.
They were really old and really dusty, and I came across these signatures in the title pages of each volume.
I'm Gwen Wright, and I'm visiting Brad in his hometown of Spartanburg, South Carolina, to check into his story. The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon. It must be over a million words. So how'd you come to acquire these?
Well, there's a small library in Edgefield, South Carolina that had books for sale. So I picked them up, and I found that on the title page of each volume was what appeared to be a signature of John C. Calhoun.
It's very faint. Brad may have found something significant. Calhoun was the most intellectual of Southern leaders in the 19th century. These books are the most famous work of the English historian Edward Gibbon, in which he studied the politics of the Roman Empire. Did you know that Gibbon is considered one of the first modern historians?
No, I didn't know.
It's because this set of books was trying to explain how and why the empire became so powerful and then fell apart. Well, tell me exactly what you'd like for me to find out, Brad.
Well, I'd like you to find out if the books were once owned by John C. Calhoun and if they might have influenced his political philosophy at all.
Well, do you have anything else for me to go on than the books themselves?
I found tucked away in these books an index card that says that these books may have been sold by John C. Calhoun to the James Madison Abney family in Edgefield County, South Carolina, who then gave these books to the library where I purchased them.
Well, I'm quite intrigued by the story. I'll get back to you as soon as I learn something.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing.
Before I hit the road, I want to take a closer look at Brad's books. These date from, let's see, 1789. That would have been one of the first editions. They say you can tell a lot about a man from the books in his library. In these volumes, Gibbon wrestled with the essential questions of why some regimes survive and others fail. If Calhoun read Gibbon, he was confronting similar issues. Gibbon knew how to tell an exciting story, and he influenced a number of important statesmen well into the 20th century. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, "I devoured Gibbon. I rode through him triumphantly from the first volume to the last." It's an intriguing idea that these books might have belonged to John C. Calhoun. Is it possible that Gibbon's history of Rome helped shape Calhoun's thinking about the political conflict which stirred the Civil War? Well, this is interesting. There's some writing, I think in pencil, here on the inside of the back cover, but it's so faint now, it's totally illegible. I need to find out a little more about both Calhoun and Gibbon. But first, I'm going to check these signatures and see if we can make anything out of the faded writing in the books. I'm meeting forensic document examiner Emily Will. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Gwen.
Good to see you. So what do you have for me?
This is the signature from the book, and this is a known Calhoun signature. So what you see here is these aren't closed circles, but they are open at about the 1 or 2 o'clock position.
Oh, in the same place, I bet.
In the same place and in the same basic shape. And then we have a similar L and a connecting stroke to the top of the H.
Oh,
so
that's
we have,
very similar, it seems.
Yes.
Emily also notices some major differences in the signatures. Ours has fully formed letters of similar height, but in his official signature, Calhoun's letters taper off.
And the end of the signature, it kind of falls apart. It's just a wavering line.
Well, there was also some writing at the back of that book. Did you find anything on that?
Yes, I did. I've used the video spectral comparator, which is a device that extends human vision into the infrared. The carbon in the pencil absorbs infrared, and it becomes dark against the paper.
At first, it seems the new technology is going to bring the old text back to life.
This says cohorts consisting of 500 to 600 men, 10 cohorts constituting a legion.
But Emily tells me the writing is just too far gone.
And I cannot read beyond that part.
It's frustrating. Whoever wrote this seemed to have been taking notes about the Roman military. Calhoun was extremely interested in military affairs. In fact, he served as Secretary of War.
While it's fascinating, it's also very frustrating. We can't say for sure that this is Calhoun.
I'm heading to Fort Hill Plantation, Calhoun's former home in South Carolina's upcountry. I've brought some reading for the ride. Calhoun was born in South Carolina in 1782, at the dawn of American independence. In his early career, he was a staunch defender of the Union, arguing for a strong federal government, a powerful military, and a central bank. He held several posts in government and was twice elected vice president. But in 1832, Calhoun quit the vice presidency. He began to agitate for Southern agricultural interests, believing Northern manufacturers had too much control over national affairs. He famously argued that states had the right to nullify or overrule federal law. His zealous defense of the South earned him the nickname the Cast Iron Man. Although Fort Hill was once a classic Southern cotton plantation, Calhoun was not born into privilege or education. His pioneer father had fought the Indians, and as a boy, Calhoun worked the fields of the family farm. I'm meeting with Calhoun historian Kendra Hamilton.
So I'd presume with this frontier background that there was not a lot of education which we might associate with the South in Calhoun's early life.
Absolutely not. He was virtually illiterate until he was 13 years old. And then at that time, he was sent off to get an education with his brother-in-law.
Kendra says that a hunger for books transformed Calhoun from farm boy to future statesman.
Suddenly, he was immersing himself in Voltaire and Locke and reading the life of Charles V and reading about Cook's voyages. He just completely glutted himself to the point where his family became concerned that his health might be in jeopardy.
Calhoun's view of slavery may also be a clue. Kendra says that as he and his fellow planters grew rich from cotton and slavery, Calhoun became less interested in defending the Union and more concerned with fending off attacks from Northern abolitionists.
He believed that slavery was the best way to, form a hedge against mob rule. Calhoun had a very pessimistic view of human character. He rejected all of that talk about natural rights and inalienable rights. He believed in the inequality of man.
The Southern planters were attracted to all things Roman. Abolitionists quoted from the Bible to condemn slavery. Since Rome had been a slave state, Calhoun and the planters turned to the classics to defend slavery in the South.
They compared their civilization, which they considered to be the height of anything that was then existent in the world. They looked back to Greece and Rome and made those parallels. In fact, we see this little bust of Calhoun here draped in a toga. That's a very characteristic type of pose.
Well, Kendra, do you think that Calhoun would have read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire?
I have never read a specific reference to Calhoun's having read Gibbon.
Figuring out if Calhoun ever owned our Gibbon volumes may be impossible. According to Kendra, many of the books in Calhoun's personal library burned in a fire in the late 1800s. I'm meeting Calhoun scholar H. Lee Cheek at the Civil War ruins in Columbia, South Carolina, where Sherman's troops burned antebellum mansions to the ground. Cheek believes that Calhoun is a largely misunderstood figure, and that he spent much of his political life trying to avoid the destruction the Civil War produced.
Is really best thought of as one of the last of the Founding Fathers. He was trained in a classical manner, somebody who revered power restrained, not power abused.
He disagrees with Kendra and believes that Calhoun's support for slavery was in many ways a response to what he saw as the dangerous, radical ideas of abolitionists.
But his view of slavery really was that it was, for this moment, a temporary institution that would dissipate over time.
So it wasn't so much that he was against change in any way. He was against dangerous, precipitous, sudden change.
Yes, the social upheavals, which he thought would be worse for all people in the South and really all people in the country.
Cheek believes Calhoun may have seen parallels between the fate of Rome and the fate of the United States.
One of Gibbon's great and I think most neglected criticisms is there's a difference between the stability of a regime and an empire. Calhoun believed in preserving the regime of which he was part and which he deeply loved, but he feared empire.
Cheek says Calhoun's sense of civic obligation would have attracted him to Rome, and in his later years, he would have seen the power of the federal government as an amoral force imposed on the South.
Gibbon revered the Roman Republic, as Calhoun would as well, from a political and an historical and really in a kind of social sense. And they both had a high appreciation of virtue in the citizenry, and virtue had to be perpetuated. And there were certain circumstances that diminished virtue. For example, when you create an empire and you do those kinds of things, expansion of power, you centralize power too much in one part of government.
Cheek has made what may be a very important discovery, and it's in Calhoun's own handwriting.
This is a letter that Calhoun wrote to a young aspiring barrister by the name of Johnson in 1836. Mr. Johnson asked Calhoun, "What should I be reading in preparation for a life in the law and in public affairs?"
So let me see. As to history, he will, of course, study all the ancient classics, to be followed by Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
But did the volumes that Brad bought from a local library once belong to Calhoun? I'm still not certain. I'm headed to Clemson University, which houses Calhoun's papers. The index card inside one of the volumes said Calhoun sold his books to a man named Abney, an Edgefield County planter. That could be an important clue. Calhoun ran a cotton plantation, and those South Carolina planters were a very close-knit group. I'm looking through the history of the area. Here's a map of Edgefield County, which borders right on Abbeville County, where John C. Calhoun was born. The Calhouns and the Abneys were neighbors. I wonder if there are any references to an Abney in Calhoun's papers. The index points me to a letter, which turns out to contain some telling information. Look at this. I think I have my answer for Brad. Well, Brad, first I want to thank you for sending me on a fascinating journey through the history of the South. Unfortunately, I can't say for sure that these are John C. Calhoun's signature.
Okay.
Then I tell him about the discovery I'd made in the Clemson University Library. Oh, here's something. Deep in the Calhoun archives is a copy of an 1847 letter sent to him in Washington. It's from a unit of South Carolina militia, asking Calhoun to back their choice for Brigadier General. And they're appealing for Calhoun's support, and they evoke with Calhoun a shared love of South Carolina. And among the signatories is Joseph Abney. I tell Brad that Joseph Abney was a cousin of James Abney, the cotton planter listed on the card in his volumes. It's another piece of our puzzle that fits. So given the closeness of those two families, and of that group in particular, there's a good chance that John C. Calhoun owned those books and sold them to young Abney. I tell Brad that almost certainly his set of books shaped the thinking of one of the South's most significant public figures.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Definitely makes me value them more, and before they just kind of been tucked away in a closet. But now I'd love to be able to talk about these books to other people that are interested in them.
For many, the cast-iron man, John Calhoun, is a model of Calvinist rectitude, a statesman who struggled to keep the nation from war. But for others, Calhoun's Achilles heel was his belief that a nation could long endure while a fifth of its population were not free.
Calhoun's major blind spot was slavery. He never could have a nuanced view of the damage that was done by slavery. And as a consequence, he drove the nation to disunion. There's a wonderful story that's in Whitman's Civil War Diaries where he overhears two veterans talking. One says, "I've seen Calhoun's monument." The other one says, "No, you haven't seen Calhoun's monument, I have." Calhoun's monument is in the bodies of the dead and the broken and the bloodied that I've seen on the battlefields of the South.
Our next story examines the origins of an American icon that gave birth to an empire. It's 1928. A mischievous mouse named Mickey bursts onto the silver screen. He's the toast of Hollywood, an overnight success who rockets a young animator named Walter Elias Disney to fame and fortune. Mickey Mouse is soon recognized as a symbol of American culture the world over. At least, that's how the popular story goes. But in San Francisco, California, a man found an object that he thinks adds a new wrinkle to that story. Avid collector Jeff Kane came across this mouse at a toy fair.
I collect cartoon animals, toys from the 20s, 30s, 40s. And this one day I found this little Funny Flex character about 4.5 inches tall, either a rat-like or mouse-like character. And right on his chest it said Mickey, M-I-C-K-Y, no E. And I thought that was a bit strange. This was a character I'd never seen before.
Could this tiny toy be the original Mickey Mouse? I'm Wes Cowan, and I've come to the city by the bay to take a look. As an auctioneer of Americana, I'm really intrigued by this case. So, Jeff, where's this toy you were telling me about?
Well, Wes, I have it right here. Here he is here.
Oh, wow, look at that. Wooden body, little wire arms and legs that are posable. Take a look at that long tail. What I find really curious about this is this label on the chest. I thought that the song went M-I-C-K-E-Y, and this label says M-I-C-K-Y.
Well, that odd misspelling is what got me curious in the first place. And it got me wondering if this old toy could really be the very first original Mickey Mouse.
You know, why would you think that, just because of the spelling?
No, because right here on the bottom, see that patent label?
Oh, yeah, look at that. August 17th, 1926. Boy, that is early. Well, that gives me something to go on. You mind if I take this little guy with me?
Not at all.
To find out if Jeff owns the first Mickey Mouse, I need to hit the library to check some facts. Okay, here we go. The birth of Mickey Mouse is obscured in legend, much of it created by Walt Disney himself. Walt tells the story that he created Mickey Mouse on a train ride from New York to Los Angeles in 1928. Needing a star for his struggling company, Walt takes out pen and paper and draws a character wearing gloves, shoes, and red shorts with buttons. And he calls this mouse Mortimer. Well, Walt's wife apparently hated the name Mortimer and suggested Mickey. Some Disney historians downplay that romantic story, saying that Mickey Mouse emerged from a series of brainstorming meetings at Disney's studio. Whatever the truth, Disney's tiny star debuted in Steamboat Willie in 1928, the first of a string of hits for Disney Studios and the birth of a multi-billion-dollar entertainment empire. Years later, Walt was quoted as saying, "Just remember, this all started with a mouse." Yeah, but which mouse? Could the mouse that inspired Disney have been Jeff's mouse, which may have been around 2 years earlier? I want to show our Mickey to an expert in American popular culture collectibles, my fellow history detective, Elise LeRae. Okay, Elise, here is Jeff's mouse. What do you think?
Cute.
Okay, let's see. Wood and wire construction. It's very flexible, very common from this time period. It's a period piece from the late 1920s, but, you know, nothing unusual. He looks like a lot of characters from that time period.
Yeah, but how about the label on the chest?
All right, well, it's missing the E, which you know. But it was very common in that time period for a lot of toys to have the name across the chest. That's nothing unusual.
Now, there's a patent date on the bottom, 1926, and so I'm wondering, could this be an early version of Mickey Mouse?
Mickey was made in 1928, but really toys from Disney didn't start appearing until about 1930. Usually you patent the character and then the toys come later. My advice is to go after the patent and get some information from that.
It's my next stop. I'm taking Elisa's suggestion and searching the website of the U.S. Patent Office. But I only have the date. I need a patent number if I'm going to find the records. So I call a regional patent and trademark depository library. I'm looking for a listing for a wooden toy mouse for the patent date August 17th, 1926. They found it. On August 17th, 1926, an invention was registered under Animal Toy. I punch in the number. The number checks out. It's our toy. And the inventor's not Walt Disney, it's someone named Reen Grove. Let's see. Assigning rights to the Performo Toy Company of Middletown, Pennsylvania. But it was made 2 years before Walt created his Mickey. But there is something missing. I can't find the name Mickey anywhere. Maybe the Mickey label was added at a later date. I make a follow-up call to find out if the name was trademarked. I'm looking for a trademark taken out by the Performo Toy Company. On February 8th, 1927, the Performo Toy Company registered a trademark for the name Mickey. It seems Jeff's toy did come out 2 years before Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse. But was this Mickey the source of Walt's inspiration? I've got to find out more about this little toy company and their Mickey with no E. So I'm headed to Middletown, Pennsylvania. Middletown is a small industrial borough just outside the state capital of Harrisburg. Here, 80 years ago, the Performo Company picked the perfect time to enter the toy business. In the early 1900s, retailers first recognized children as a potential consumer market. At first, the demand for toys was met by Germany, the world's top toy maker. But during World War I, American embargoes on German products opened the doors for small companies like Performo. By 1926, the United States was the largest toy producer in the world. Here at the Middletown Area Historical Society, curator Maxine Daimler shows me their collection of Performo wooden toys.
And here is our Performo toys that Reen Grove made.
So all of these were made by Performo?
Yes, they were.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I certainly recognize this guy in the middle here. That is Performo's Mickey.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that was the most popular toy.
Maxine says the Mickey toy is a source of Middletown pride, and she is certain where the inventor got the name.
He held a contest for employees to pick a name, and one employee was selected with the best name, which was Mickey.
Maxine arranges an interview for me with former Historical Society Secretary Elner Overdeer. Elner knew the inventor, Reen Grove, and has vivid memories of his Mickey toy.
Children loved it because you could twist it. You know, you could twist it any which way. And as long as you balanced it, it would stand. And that was the one thing that I learned because I was a very curious child.
Elner then repeated a story that has become a town legend, that Walt Disney copied Performo's Mickey, and that the Pennsylvania company then sued Disney.
Reen Grove was never in favor of the lawsuit. It was his brother-in-law who was the manager of manufacturing who persisted in pursuing it.
Ellner says that the decision to take on Disney proved fatal.
And when the decision was handed down, Walt Disney won the case, and Reen Grove could never manufacture his Mickey again.
So could this story of a legal showdown over the two mice be true?
Hey, Lindsay, Wes, listen, I want you to check out any records of a lawsuit.
I call in some help from a researcher to track down any records of a court battle between the two companies. Meanwhile, I check the Historical Society's archives to look for any mention of this controversy. I find a small book called Early Industries of Middletown, Pennsylvania, and the last chapter is on the Performo Toy Company, taken from an interview with inventor Reen Grove.
It is said that Walt Disney stole this idea from Reen Grove. Controversy arose over the Mickey Mouse toy, and Reen Grove decided to depart from the Performo Toy Company. Litigation fees began to mount, and in 1935, the Performo Toy Company closed its doors.
This account seems to support Ellner's story. I wonder what the court records say about this alleged legal battle. I figure it's time to check in with my researcher.
Hey, Lindsay, what'd you find?
Lindsay faxes me a copy of a letter from the Disney archives claiming they have no knowledge of any legal action with the Performo Toy Company. And it looks like it checks out. A nationwide search of court records turns up no evidence of legal conflict between the two companies. It seems more likely that Performo went the way of other manufacturers during the Depression. Hard times forced them to padlock their doors. So I still have no proof of any connection between Mickey Mouse and Performo's Mickey. I think I'll take a different tack. Through friends in the business, I've contacted someone who might help this investigation.
Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse.
I've come to the private museum of toy designer, collector, and scholar Mel Bernkrant.
Welcome to Mouse Heaven. Great to be here. Mel.
Mel has one of the world's largest collections of early Disney collectibles and is a top expert on the art and imagery of comic characters. Mel tells me that the two Mickey toys were in direct competition in the American marketplace, but he doesn't think Disney copied Performo. He thinks it was the other way around.
And here's a Performo mouse as he started to look in the early 30s.
They put red shorts on him. And look at the little white buttons. It really looks just like Disney's Mickey.
I think Performo realized if we can't beat him, let's join him. Let's try to look as much like that famous Mickey Mouse as we can. And they felt they had the right to. They had a mouse called Mickey. Why not?
So, Mel, our little Mickey didn't influence Disney at all.
Let me show you where Mickey came from. Follow me.
All right.
What Mel showed me next gave me the final piece in this investigation. And the first thing I told Jeff was that this was not Disney's first Mickey Mouse.
Okay. But the story doesn't end there. Right before I came out here, I met with a toy collector named Mel.
Then I told Jeff what Mel had said. It seems that neither Mickey was America's first celebrity mouse.
Mickey evolved from a whole series of generic mice that were in every cartoon before him. Wes, take a look at this. Here's Felix the Cat, 1922. Every Felix cartoon had mice like that in it. Here's Milton Mouse from Aesop's Movie Fables, 1920. And here's Ignatz Mouse. Sure looks a lot like that Mickey, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He was in Crazy Cat cartoons and comic strip from 1914 on.
This is like 10 years before.
10 years before. These mice were everywhere.
But what made Mickey Mouse break through the pack?
Two things. Exquisite design, and the fact that he was in the movies, and that the movies were in sound.
Hooray for Hollywood.
So Disney's Mickey Mouse became a movie superstar and chased all the other mice away.
Wes, in this tale of two Mickeys, Performo's mouse didn't stand a chance.
So this isn't Disney's Mickey Mouse, but I do believe that it's the first Mickey, without the E, that was ever marketed to the public.
I always thought there'd be a story behind this this old toy, and it's nice finally to check it out.
It's a great story, and I really want to thank you for bringing it to my attention.
In the July 15, 1933 edition of the Middletown Gazette, the Performo Toy Company announced they were filing for bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Disney's Mickey Mouse toys dominated the marketplace. By 1935, Mickey Mouse merchandise earned more money than Mickey Mouse cartoons, a first in motion picture history.
Do you still own a childhood doll and wonder if it has monetary value as well as sentimental value?
You're not the only cuddly toy that was ever enjoyed by any boy.
Is that toy that you picked up at a local flea market a vintage collectible? How do you tell the difference between jewels and junk? For starters, ask yourself the obvious. What condition is it in? Toys and dolls were meant to be used and abused and often end up a dim shadow of their former selves.
You're not the only choo-choo train.
Is your piece animated? Does it have movable parts? If so, and all the parts are original, you may have something of value. But if one small piece is repaired or replaced, even a wheel, the value plummets. Next, find out its age. If you're not sure, look for a patent. But be careful. A patent tells you when the toy was first manufactured, not necessarily when your toy was produced. If your toy was in production for a very long time, it might be a more recent example, making it far less valuable. The easiest way to do an appraisal is to find a comparable either at the library, an auction, or on the web. There are thousands of toys on the market today, but remember, due to condition and rarity, prices range from thousands of dollars to very little. Do your homework, know your price range, and most of all, have fun. Toys may have been made for children, but adults can enjoy them as well. To learn more, go to History Detectives at pbs.org.
History Detectives will return in a moment, but first.
Be a history detective yourself. Go to pbs.org and learn more about investigative techniques or submit your own mystery to the team. You can also find out more about tonight's investigations only at pbs.org.
Watching the detectives. It's just like watching the detectives. Watching the detectives. Watching the detectives.
This program was made possible by contributions to local PBS stations by viewers like you. Thank you.